The screaming started 3 cycles before anyone believed it was real. Border stations along the outer drift reported ships vanishing, not destroyed, vanished. No debris fields, no distress signals that made sense, just silence where voices had been, and then later the bodies, what was left of them. The Cathedral Imperium didn't believe in mercy. They believed in examples. Councillor Vrain stood in the observation gallery of the Unity Conclave station, her 4 eyes tracking the holographic display that rotated slowly in the dead center of the chamber. She was Salahian, a species whose entire evolutionary history had been spent avoiding predators, and every ridge along her spine was currently flared in unconscious alarm. The display showed 17 systems, all marked in pulsing red. "They hit Felbrin Station 4 hours ago," said Commander Okath, his carapace clicking softly as he gestured with one bladed limb. He was Visnari, a species that had once conquered half their home continent before achieving spaceflight. He did not scare easily. 7,000 civilians. The station sent one transmission. They're inside the walls. Then nothing. Vrain's throat sac pulsed, a Salahian stress response she couldn't fully suppress. And the defense fleet. Gone. We found 3 ships, pieces of 3 ships. Okath's mandibles tightened. The Cathedral don't negotiate, they don't occupy, they take what they want and burn the rest. Behind them the council chamber filled slowly. Delegates from 43 species, representing hundreds of worlds, all gathering because the thing they'd feared for 2 generations had finally arrived in force. The Cathedral had been a minor threat once. A species of raiders from a resource bore system, desperate and cruel. Then they'd found something in the deep black, some kind of ancient weapons cache. The popular theory went, and everything changed. Their ships moved faster, their weapons burned hotter, and their appetites grew. "How long until they reach core territories?" asked Delegate Perham, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into nervous patterns. Okath didn't sugarcoat it. At their current pace, 18 days. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, translation matrices struggling to keep up. Panic spread like heat. Vrain felt it too. The Salahian had 12 colony worlds, all of them in the Cathedral's path. She'd seen the footage from the border stations. The way the Cathedral ships moved, fluid, predatory, wrong. The way they breached hulls and pulled crews out into vacuum, studying them before letting them die. What about the Terrans? The question came from the back of the chamber. A small voice, easily missed. The room went quiet. Vrain turned. The speaker was Ambassador Cole, a Peleshi diplomat whose species specialized in historical records. His head tendrils were curled tight, a sign of extreme stress. "What about them?" Okath said slowly. "The Terrans," Cole repeated. "The humans, they've been in cryo sleep for what, 80 years? Their entire colony fleet, 23 ships, 200,000 people. They went dark after the treaty violations, but the fleet is still out there, still in the verge." Vrain felt her spine ridges flatten. "You want to wake them?" "I want to not die," Cole said bluntly. "The humans were dangerous. Everyone remembers. That's why we froze them out of the council, why we cut their supply lines until they had no choice but to go into cryo and drift to the outer colonies. But they were dangerous to everyone, including invaders." "They were dangerous to us," snapped Delegate Harren, her fur bristling. "They didn't follow protocol, they didn't respect boundaries, they treated warlike." "Like they wanted to win," Cole interrupted. "Yes. That's my point." Okath's mandibles clicked in what might have been dark amusement. "You're suggesting we wake a species we exiled because we were afraid of them, to fight another species we're afraid of?" "Yes." The silence that followed was heavy. Vrain looked at the holographic display again. 17 systems, 7,000 dead on Felbrin Station alone, and the Cathedral were accelerating. "We don't even know if the humans are alive," she said quietly. 80 years in cryo is long. "Their ships are still transmitting," Cole said. "Low-power beacons. I checked. The fleet is in the verge, near the edge of the Korath Nebula. If we send a fast courier, we could reach them in 6 days. And if we wake them and they decide we're the enemy, Harren demanded. Cole's tendrils uncurled slightly. Then we'll have 2 enemies instead of 1, but at least we'll have tried something. Vrain looked around the chamber. She saw fear, desperation. And beneath it the ugly truth. They had no other options. The combined council fleets couldn't stop the Kethral. Every simulation said so. They needed a miracle or they needed a monster. Maybe the humans were both. Vote, Okath said simply. It wasn't unanimous, but it was enough. The Verge, outer corona of the Korath Nebula. The courier ship Vela's hymn dropped out of faster-than-light travel and immediately went silent, passive sensors only, drifting on inertia. Captain Sovereign didn't like this place. The Verge was what you called space that nobody wanted, too far from trade lanes, too close to radiation storms, full of old asteroid fields and dead stations from species that hadn't made it. It was where you sent things you wanted to forget, like the humans. Got the beacon, said his sensor officer, a soft-spoken Kelsh named Privet. Bearing 27 Mark IV, distance, 17 million kilometers. Sovereign felt his stomachs tighten, visual. The main screen flickered, then resolved. The human fleet hung in the black like a sleeping graveyard. 23 ships, each one massive by the standards of the time they'd been built. Colony vessels, the humans had called them. Generation ships designed to carry entire populations across the dark. They were ugly things, functional, blocky, covered in radiator panels and sensor blisters and docking scaffolds. No elegance, no art, just brutal efficiency, and they were all dark, no running lights. No engine glow, just the faint glitter of ice on their hulls where centuries of micro-impacts had fused into frost. Life signs, Sovereign asked. Privet worked quietly. Minimal power from all ships. Cryo systems are still active. That's remarkable, actually. 80 years and their backups haven't failed. Humans built things to last, Sovereign muttered. He'd read the histories. Before the exile, humanity had been expanding fast, too fast. They didn't ask permission, didn't wait for council approval. They just showed up, built stations, claimed territory. And when other species pushed back, the humans pushed harder. It wasn't that they were more advanced. They weren't. But they fought like every battle was the last one, and they didn't stop until they won or died. The council had decided humanity was too dangerous to integrate, too unpredictable, so they'd cut them off, starved their colonies of resources, forced them to choose, submit to council authority or leave. The humans chose to leave. Bring us in close, Sovereign said. Find their command ship. It took 20 minutes of slow maneuvering, but they found it, Uskv Endurance, a name still visible in faded paint across the hull, larger than the others, bristling with communication arrays. Broadcast the wake signal, Sovereign said. Council authentication codes, priority alpha. Privet hesitated. Sir, we are authorized to wake them. We are authorized to try not to die, Sovereign said. Send it. The signal went out, a tightly packed data burst containing the current galactic situation, the Council's formal request for aid, and authentication proving they weren't pirates or scavengers. Then they waited. 1 minute, 5, 10. Sir, Privet said suddenly, voice tight. Power spike on the Endurance. Multiple systems coming online. They're waking up. Sovereign felt his pulse quicken. Hail them. The channel opened with a wash of static, then a voice, rough, sluggish, but unmistakably human. This is Captain Elias Cade of the Endurance. Who the hell are you, and why did you wake us up? Sovereign exhaled slowly. Captain Cade, this is Captain Sovereign of the Council vessel Vela's hymn. We are here under emergency authority. The galaxy is under attack. We need your help. A long pause, then, you've got to be kidding. Command deck, Uskv Endurance. Elias Cade felt like death. Cryo sleep wasn't gentle. It wasn't like closing your eyes and waking up refreshed. It was cold that soaked into your bones, disorientation that made you forget your name for the first 30 seconds, and a hunger that felt like your stomach was trying to eat itself. He sat in the command chair, bare feet on the freezing deck plates, wearing the thin jumpsuit they'd gone under in. Around him, the bridge crew was waking in stages. Lieutenant Sarah Movich at navigation, rubbing her eyes and wincing. Chief Engineer Hayes at the damage control console, already swearing softly. Ensign Parker comms, looking like he might throw up. The main screen showed the alien ship. Small, sleek, painted in soft colors, it looked like a toy. "Run that by me again," Cade said, voice still rough. The alien captain, Sovan he'd said, repeated the situation. An enemy called the Keithrel. Overwhelming force. Systems falling. The Council fleets in retreat. And they wanted the humans to fight. "Let me get this straight," Cade said slowly. 80 years ago you exiled us, cut off our supply lines, forced us into Cryo because we were too dangerous for your perfect council, and now you want us to wake up and fight your war." "Yes," Sovan said simply. Cade looked at Movich. She shrugged, still groggy. He looked at Hayes. The engineer just shook his head. "Why should we?" Cade asked. "Because if the Keithrel reach the core systems, they won't stop," Sovan said. "They'll burn everything, including the colonies you were heading toward." Cade felt that land. The Endurance and her sister ships had been headed toward the far colonies, systems the Council didn't care about, places humanity could start over, but those systems weren't unreachable, if the Keithrel kept expanding. "How bad is it?" Cade asked. Sovan didn't lie. He pulled up the tactical display and sent it over. 17 systems lost, casualty estimates in the millions. Projections showing the Keithrel advance reaching core space in 18 days. Cade studied the data. "Your fleets. Outmatched, their ships are faster, their weapons stronger. We don't know how. And you think we can help?" "I think you're the only ones who might," Sovan said quietly. "The humans never lost a war, not one, we remember." Cade smiled, bitter and tired. "We never lost because we didn't fight wars we couldn't win. We fought dirty, we adapted, and we didn't stop." He leaned forward. "You hated us for it." "Yes," Sovan admitted. "But right now hate doesn't matter, survival does." Cade looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting. "Wake the fleet," he said. Unity Conclave Station, Council Chamber. Councillor Vrain watched the live feed with something close to dread. The human fleet was moving, all 23 ships, their engines burning bright after 80 years of silence. They'd regrouped in formation, and now they were accelerating toward Council space, their course locked onto Unity Conclave Station. "They'll arrive in 4 days, Okath reported. "Faster than expected. Their drives are efficient." 4 days, Vrain repeated. 4 days until they faced the species they'd exiled. The species that had scared the Council so badly they'd chosen isolation over integration. "What if they don't help?" Delegate Harren asked, her voice small. "What if they demand concessions, territory, revenge?" "Then we negotiate," Vrain said, though her spine ridges betrayed her anxiety. The truth was, nobody knew what the humans would do. Humanity's files were full of contradictions. They were explorers who claimed entire systems without asking. They were scientists who shared medical advances freely. They were warriors who fought with terrifying coordination. They were diplomats who walked out of negotiations when insulted. They were, in short, impossible to predict. "The Keithrel hit another system," Okath said quietly, updating the display. 18 now. Vrain closed her eyes. 18 systems, and the humans were still 4 days away. Oscar Endurance, Medical Bay. Dr. Lena Vasquez worked through the Cryo cases with practiced efficiency, but her hands were shaking. 200,000 people, 23 ships, all of them waking up to a galaxy that still didn't want them, asking them to fight. "Vitals are stable across the fleet," her assistant reported. "Some cases of cryofugue, standard disorientation, but no major failures." "Good," Lena said. She pulled up the tactical briefing Cade had distributed. "The Keithrel, the attacks, the projections, it was bad, She'd been a trauma surgeon before the Exodus, back when humanity had still been trying to earn a seat at the Council's table. She'd seen what happened when species went to war in space. It was ugly, fast, and it left scars that never healed, and now they were going back into it. "Doctor," her assistant asked, "are we really doing this?" Lena looked at the young woman, barely 25 when they'd gone under, still 25 now, with 80 years stolen from her life. "Yes," Lena said, "we're doing this. Because the thing about humans was, they didn't abandon people. Not even people who'd abandoned them first. It was stupid, irrational, but it was who they were." Keythrall Command Vessel, Deep Black. Warprime Thesic watched the holographic display of the galaxy and felt satisfaction. 18 systems broken, resources claimed, examples made. The Keythrall were apex, always had been. The galaxy had simply been too soft to realize it. "New data," his intelligence officer hissed. "The Council is moving assets, consolidating fleets near their core worlds." "Expected," Thesic said. His species had fought for survival for 10 generations on a dying world. They knew desperation. They knew that prey always ran before it died. "There's something else," the officer continued. "A human fleet, 23 ships, heading toward Council space." Thesic's head crest flared. "Humans?" "Yes, Warprime, they were in cryo sleep. The Council woke them." Thesic studied the data. Humanity's files were marked in the archive as extinct, exiled, low threat. But the old reports told a different story. The humans had fought 3 border conflicts before their exile. "They'd won all 3. Numbers?" Thesic asked. 200,000 estimated, outdated ships, no recent combat experience. Thesic clicked his teeth. "Monitor them. If they interfere, we'll burn them with the rest." But as the officer left, Thesic found himself studying the human files more closely. There was something in the old reports, a phrase that kept appearing: unpredictable engagement doctrine. He didn't like that phrase. Unity Conclave Station, Docking Bay 7. The Endurance came in slowly, her massive bulk filling the docking scaffold like a mountain sliding into place. Councillor Vrain stood in the observation gallery, watching through the transparent aluminium as the human ship locked into position. Up close, it was even uglier, scarred, patched, ancient. But its engines had brought it across the galaxy, and its systems were still running. "They're requesting permission to send a delegation," Okath said. Vrain's spine ridges flattened. "Granted." 20 minutes later, the airlock cycled open, and the humans stepped through. Captain Elias Cade was tall, lean, with grey at his temples and eyes that looked older than his file said he was. Behind him came a woman in a medical uniform, an engineer with oil on his hands, and a young officer carrying a data pad. Cade stopped 3 meters away and didn't salute. He just looked at Vrain with an expression she couldn't read. "Counselor," he said. "You wanted monsters, here we are." Vrain forced herself not to step back. "Captain Cade, thank you for coming." "Didn't have much choice," Cade said. "You woke us up, now we're awake." He glanced at the data display on the wall showing the Keythrall advance. "So, you want us to fight?" "Yes, why should we?" Vrain had prepared an answer. Something about shared survival, common threats, the greater good. But looking at this man, this human who'd been exiled, frozen, and dragged back into a war that wasn't his, she couldn't bring herself to lie. "Because we're desperate," she said. "Because we're losing. And because you're the only ones who might be able to stop them." Cade studied her, then slowly he nodded. "All right, we'll help, but we do it our way." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't give us orders, you give us objectives, and you don't question our methods." Okath's mandibles clicked sharply. "You're asking for total, operational freedom." "Yes, That's unacceptable," Delegate Harron said, her fur bristling. "You'll be acting under Council authority." Cade cut her off. "We'll be acting under human authority. You want our help, those are the terms. We're not your soldiers, we're not your weapons. We're a free fleet offering aid, take it or leave it. The chamber went silent. Vrain felt her heart's pounding. This was the human arrogance she'd read about, the refusal to bow, the absolute certainty, but she looked at the display again. 18 systems, millions dead. Accepted, she said. Harren started to protest, but Vrain silenced her with a gesture. Captain Cade, you'll have operational freedom. What do you need? Intelligence, Cade said immediately. Everything you have on the Keythrall. Ship specs, tactics, supply lines, psychology, and access to your defense grid codes. Why the defense grid? Because if we're going to fight smart, Cade said. And that means knowing what assets we have, where they are, and how to use them. Vrain hesitated, then nodded. You'll have it. Cade's expression softened slightly. We'll stop them, Counselor, but there's going to be a cost. There always is. I understand. I hope you do, Cade said quietly. Then he turned and walked back toward the airlock. As the humans left, Okath stepped close to Vrain. Do you trust them? No, Vrain said, but I trust that they want to survive, and right now that's enough. Human fleet anchorage, Tertius Belts. The human fleet didn't dock at Unity Station. Instead, they moved to an asteroid belt 3 systems away and began setting up operations in a way that made the Council observers deeply uncomfortable. They stripped asteroids for raw materials. They fabricated weapons in mobile foundries attached to their colony ships. They ran combat drills with a precision that suggested they'd never stop training, even in Cryo. And they didn't share their plans. They're building something, the Council observer reported back to Vrain. Missile platforms, I think, hundreds of them. Did they say what for? Number Captain Cade said, and I quote, you'll see. Vrain resisted the urge to flare her spine ridges. The humans were infuriating, but they were also working faster than any Council fleet could manage, turning an empty belt into a forward operating base in 72 hours. What about the Keythrall? She asked. They hit System 19 this morning, Okath reported, his voice grim. A mining colony, 8,000 dead. They're accelerating. How long until they reach Tertius? 6 days. Vrain looked at the tactical display. The humans were directly in the Keythrall's path. Either by design or by accident, they'd positioned themselves as the first line of defense. Do they know? Yes, Okath said. Captain Cade said they're counting on it. Ask of Endurance, War Room. Cade stood at the holographic table, surrounded by his senior staff and the captains of the other colony ships, all linked in via holopresence. The Keythrall moved fast and hit hard, he said, highlighting their attack patterns on the display. But they're not subtle. Every attack follows the same pattern: overwhelm defenses, breach the station, take what they want, burn the rest. They're raiders who got lucky with advanced tech. Lucky, Captain Tors of the Valiant said darkly. They've taken 18 systems. Because nobody's fought back properly, Cade said. The Council fleets are trying to fight a conventional war. Formations, lines of battle, fleet engagements. The Keythrall don't care about that. They swarm, they adapt, and they move on. So what's our play? Captain Reeves asked. Cade zoomed in on the Tertius belt. We make them come to us. We seed this entire belt with missile platforms, cheap, fast, expendable. We make it look like we're building a defensive position, and when they arrive, he smiled coldly, we show them what humans do when we're cornered. Which is, Tors asked. We cheat, Cade said simply. The room was quiet for a moment. Then, one by one, the captains began to smile. Keythrall forward elements, approaching Tertius belt. Warleader Sethric studied the scan data with growing interest. The human fleet was here. All 23 ships, arranged in a defensive formation around an asteroid belt, surrounded by hundreds of primitive missile platforms. They're trying to fortify, his tactical officer hissed. Standard defensive posture. Sethric clicked his teeth. The humans were supposed to be dangerous, according to the old files, but this was exactly what the Council had tried, and the Council had failed. Commit the fourth wave, Sethric ordered. Overwhelm them. Once their defenses collapse, board their ships. I want to see what made them so feared. The Kethral fleet accelerated, 78 ships moving in coordinated swarm patterns, weapons charging. They entered the belt at 0.3 light speed, and the humans sprang their trap. The missile platforms didn't fire. Instead, they detonated, all at once. Hundreds of small fusion warheads turning the entire asteroid belt into a roiling cloud of superheated plasma and debris. The Kethral ships, moving at high speed, couldn't stop. They plunged into the cloud, and their shields, designed to stop directed energy weapons, did nothing against the kinetic shrapnel of vaporized asteroids moving at relativistic speeds. 12 ships died in the first 10 seconds. Evasive, Sethric screamed, but it was too late. The human fleet wasn't in the belt anymore. They'd pulled back, used the explosions as cover, and now they were emerging from behind a large asteroid weapons hot. But they weren't using normal weapons. What is that? The tactical officer hissed. Mass drivers, primitive kinetic weapons that fired solid slugs of metal at fractions of light speed, cheap, simple, devastating against shields designed for energy weapons. The humans opened fire, and the Kethral fleet started to die. Oscom endurance, bridge. All ships staggered volleys, Cade barked. Don't let them regroup. The human fleet moved like a pack, each ship covering the others, firing in sequence to keep up constant pressure. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, but it worked. Kethral fleet is breaking formation, Movich reported. 37 ships remaining, they're trying to retreat. Don't let them, Cade said coldly. Light them up. The mass drivers kept firing. The Kethral shields failed one by one, and the ships beneath them crumpled. Sir, we are receiving a transmission, Park said, from the Kethral flagship. Put it through. The screen flickered, showing a reptilian face, crest flared in rage and fear. What are you? Sethric demanded. Cade leaned forward. We're the species you should have left alone. He cut the channel. Finish it. 5 minutes later, the Kethral fourth wave was gone. Debris and bodies floated in the ruins of the Tertius belt. Cade sat back in his chair, feeling exhaustion settle into his bones. Damage report, he said quietly. Minimal, Hayes reported. We lost some plating on the Dauntless, but no critical systems, no casualties. Cade nodded slowly. They'd won, and it had cost almost nothing. But as he looked at the debris field, he felt a familiar weight, because he knew what came next. The Kethral would escalate, they always did, and the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you woke up humanity. Unity Conclave Station, Council Chamber. The chamber was silent as the battle footage played. Councillor Vrain watched the Kethral fleet die, watched the humans fight with brutal efficiency, and felt something shift inside her. They won, Delegate Perham whispered. They slaughtered them, Harren corrected, her fur flat against her skin. 78 ships. They destroyed 78 ships. The Kethral have destroyed entire systems, Okath said quietly. This is war. The humans understand that. Vrain looked at the tactical display. The Kethral advance had stopped. For the first time in weeks, the red markers weren't spreading. What now? She asked. Now, Okath said, we see what the Kethral do when someone hits back. Kethral Corps Command, deep blacks. Warprime Thesic stared at the report, his crest flared so high it ached. The fourth wave, gone, 78 ships, destroyed by an inferior force using primitive weapons and ambush tactics. The humans, he hissed. Yes, Warprime, his intelligence officer confirmed. They deliberately positioned themselves as bait. They turned their defensive platform into a weapon. We did not anticipate this. Thesic clicked his teeth, a low, furious sound. The Kethral did not lose. They did not retreat. They were apex. Prepare the Grand Fleet, he said. All combat vessels. We will burn the humans and the Council together. War Prime, that's 300 ships. I know what it is, Thezig snapped. The humans have shown us they are a threat. We will eliminate that threat, completely. The officer bowed and left. Thezig studied the human files again, unpredictable engagement doctrine, ambush tactics, refusal to surrender. He didn't like any of it. But it didn't matter, numbers mattered, and the Keithrall had numbers. Ask of Endurance, Captain's Quarters. Cade sat alone, staring at the casualty reports from the Keithrall attacks. Millions dead, worlds burned, the door chimed. Come in. Dr. Lena Vasquez stepped inside, carrying 2 cups of something that smelled like coffee but probably was. Thought you could use this, she said, handing him one. Cade took it gratefully. Thanks. Lena sat down across from him. The crew's rattled, she said quietly. We just killed a lot of people, species, whatever, and everyone knows the Keithrall are going to come back harder. They are, Cade agreed. Can we win? Cade was quiet for a long moment. Then, I don't know, but we can make it cost them, and maybe that's enough. Lena studied him. You really believe we should help the Council, after what they did to us? No, Cade said honestly. I think the Council are hypocrites who threw us away the moment we became inconvenient, but the Keithrall aren't attacking the Council. They're attacking everyone. And if we don't stop them, they'll reach the colonies we were heading toward. Our people, our future. So we're not doing this for the Council. No, Cade said, we're doing it for us. Lena nodded slowly. All right then, let's make it count. 14 days later, the Battle of the Kelly's Threshold. The Keithrall came with everything, 300 ships, moving in a coordinated assault toward the Kelly's Threshold, the gateway to Council core space. If they broke through here, nothing would stop them from reaching the heart of the galaxy. The Council had assembled their own fleet, 200 ships from 17 species, all converging on the threshold. And in the center of the defensive line, the human fleet waited. Councillor Vrain watched from the bridge of the Council flagship Harmony's light, her spine ridges locked in a rigid line of fear. The Keithrall fleet is entering range, Okath reported. All ships, defensive formation Gamma, the fleet commander ordered, but Captain Cade's voice cut across the channel. Negative, all Council ships, pull back to secondary positions. What? The commander sputtered. Captain Cade, you don't have authority. You gave me operational freedom, Cade interrupted. Use it. Pull your ships back, let us handle the first wave. Vrain felt her heart's hammering. Captain, if you fail. We won't, Cade said simply. Trust us. Vrain looked at Okath. He clicked his mandibles, uncertain. Do it, Vrain said. The Council fleet pulled back and the human ships moved forward, 23 ships against 300. They're insane, Harren whispered. Vrain didn't answer, she just watched. The Keithrall fleet opened fire first, a wall of plasma and missiles that lit up the dark, and the human ships scattered, not in retreat, in pattern. They moved like a school of fish, each ship linked to the others through tight beam communications, adapting in real time. They didn't form lines, they didn't hold positions, they flowed and the Keithrall weapons missed. What are they doing? The fleet commander demanded. They're fighting, Okath said quietly. The human ships returned fire, their massed drivers punching through Keithrall shields with brutal efficiency. But they weren't trying to destroy the fleet. They were targeting specific ships, the ones with the most weapons, the ones coordinating the others. They're going for the command vessels, Vrain realized. How can they tell which ones those are? Harren asked. Because they've been studying the Keithrall for 2 weeks, Okath said. They know their doctrine, they know their weaknesses. The Keithrall fleet tried to adapt, tried to swarm the humans, but the human ships were too fast, too coordinated. And then the humans did something no Council fleet had ever attempted. They split up. Each human ship broke away, drawing groups of Keithrall vessels into chases, leading them into overlapping fields of fire, forcing them to get in each other's way. And when the Keithrall was scattered, disorganized, the human fleet regrouped and struck like a hammer. "All ships, focus fire on Sector 4, Cade's voice rang out. "Council fleet now." The council ships surged forward, adding their weapons to the assault, and the Kethral line broke. Not collapsed, broke, ships fleeing, ships exploding, ships drifting without power. "The Kethral flagship is retreating," Okath reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "They're running." Vrain stared at the display, 300 ships, reduced to fewer than 100 in 30 minutes, and the humans had lost 2 ships. 2? What? Harren whispered. "What are they?" Vrain didn't have an answer. Kethral flagship, deep black. Warprime Thezik sat in his command chamber, crest flat against his skull in defeat. The Grand Fleet, broken, scattered, the humans. "Warprime," his officer said quietly, "the Council is hailing us. They're offering terms." Thezik looked up. "Terms?" "Surrender, withdrawal from all occupied systems, reparations, or they'll send the humans after us." Thezik felt something cold settle in his chest. Fear, real, primal fear. "Accept," he said quietly. Unity Conclave Station, 3 days later. The treaty was signed in the council chamber, with delegates from every species present. The Kethral would withdraw, they would release all prisoners, they would pay reparations, and they would never threaten council space again. Councillor Vrain stood beside Captain Cade as the signing concluded. The human looked tired, older than when he'd arrived. "You saved us," Vrain said quietly. "We stopped them," Cade corrected. "There's a difference." "What will you do now?" Cade looked at the viewport, at the stars beyond. "We'll keep going, to the colonies we were heading toward. We'll build something out there, something that doesn't need the council." "You're still leaving." "Yes," Cade said. "You woke us up to fight your war, we did, but we didn't do it for you. We did it because it was the right thing to do, and because those colonies are our future, and we won't let anyone burn them." Vrain felt her spine ridges flatten. "I understand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry, for what the council did to you." Cade nodded slowly, apology noted. He turned to leave, then paused. "Counselor, next time you're afraid of someone, maybe try talking to them first, before you exile them." He walked away, and Vrain watched him go. Epilogue, 6 months later. The human fleet reached the far colonies and began building. Cities rose on virgin worlds. Stations took shape in orbit. And slowly, carefully, humanity started again. Councillor Vrain received reports regularly. The humans were thriving. They were also staying far away from council space. But there were other reports too. Whispers from the edge of known space. Species that had heard what the humans did at Kelly's threshold. Species that were now reaching out, asking questions. Asking if humanity was accepting allies. Vrain sat in her office, reading the reports, and felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. The galaxy had been shaken, the old certainties were gone, and in their place, something new was growing. Humanity had woken up, and the galaxy would never be the same. On the bridge of the Endurance, now in orbit above the colony world they'd named New Terra, Captain Elias Cade stood at the viewport and watched the sun rise over mountains his people would climb. "Think the council will bother us again?" Movich asked. "Maybe," Cade said, "but if they do, they'll do it respectfully." "And if they do?" Cade smiled. "Then we'll remind them." Behind him, the colony ships were already transforming, their hulls opening to release prefab habitats, their crews descending to the surface with tools and hope. Humanity had been exiled once. They wouldn't be again, and somewhere in council space, species watched and wondered, and for the first time in a long time, believed that maybe the galaxy could change. Because if humanity could forgive and fight and build after everything they'd endured, then maybe anyone could. The stars turned. And the story continued.